Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 4 with Black Ice. Okay, got another request. Sort of show the stuff that I do off camera. With a very valid point that they want to learn, you know, how I'm playing. Not that I'm necessarily playing so great or any wonderful player, but just, you know, learn sort of where I'm coming from, and so they can learn either learn the good stuff I do or learn from my mistakes. I think it's a bit of both, and it's very, very valid. Now, there's a couple of reasons I don't do this a lot. One is that from feedback and other things earlier on, when things don't change too much, there isn't much happening, players don't like it so much. It, you know, doesn't flow so well, and I do see that. Partly is
Ihre Befehle.
it comes down to just like I'm sitting here going and I don't want to say and I shouldn't say and that's very bad. Very bad. Not quite as bad as but it's not good. It's very bad broadcasting. Again, said it again there. I'm pausing and thinking instead of making mouth noises. Practice is the word I'm looking for. Broadcasting practice. It's very bad. So, again, doing it there. Part of the reason is that I'm trying to concentrate on other things, like doing all these other stuff, and I don't necessarily speak or handle the overall flow of things as well as if I'm just planning, doing pure planning operations. Part of what I do go through and check here is just try to see the effect level. Okay, here we've taken out 2 submarines. Now, this isn't counting aircraft lost from aircraft battles on aircraft. We've got another 2 submarines, so we're being an American and a British submarine. We're being somewhat effective, and now of course they still got 69, and we got a destroyer and 2 subs there. To me, going over so far, whether with regular Hearts of Iron or we lost a convoy there. We lost a sub there to 17 destroyers. Yeah, got 3 subs there. Or with the Black Ice version, it seems that naval air power might not... Ooh, we got a heavy cruiser, New Orleans class there. Though we did lose, now we had 206 aircraft of various types. We did lose 4, though we were up against a very large armada with several carrier types and things. So that's a big battle, and I would expect to lose some. Ooh, even though we lost a sub, we took down the Nevada class, of course, battleship. And here, ooh, a lot of air. Took down some more. So we're doing... I lost a sub there, and there's a bunch of these. Okay, convoy took down the Arizona. Guess the Japanese didn't get that one. Ooh, we got the Lexington. Vichy France lost a couple of fighters, but loss to kill ratio, even considering that we're the Germans and we're not building naval power. excuse me, very effectively. Still looks pretty good there. Well, we got one sub there. And lost a convoy. And took out a sub. Looks as we're having some little bit of effect way out here in the Atlantic. I'm going to click on all of those. Partially, though, I want to clear them out. Got another sub. More subs. And more subs going down. Now. So far it doesn't look like we're going to win this thing, which is not so good. Well, even with quite a bit of air power over it. Really want to secure that. Okay, good. We've got here, so we've cut these guys off. We're defending perfectly fine. They don't have any more. Yeah, we're down here, which is Durban. Yeah. So we eliminated one more of their ports. Now, why in the hell are the Portuguese not defending this? Okay, you're coming. Eventually, let's push and pursue.
Bereit zum Ausrücken.
Let's go clean that up. That may help the AI. Okay, and we are now, how are we doing for resources, particularly oil and rubber? Doing great for rubber because we're owning here Ceylon. Now we have the new 110F. Okay. No, hell yeah. But really what I want to do is 110F. Where is that? Was it the top? There. Let's click here. Especially the Navy experience. This is artificially high in my opinion, and I haven't played the newer Black Ice yet just because I'm still playing this. I hope it's somewhat fixed. Is because these endless sub battles that are going on that are generating super high experience, Navy experience. You know, this is more like the rate that it's going up, more like what the U.S. should be having because it's fighting both the Pacific War and Atlantic War with subs and anti-submarine warfare and carrier warfare and all that stuff going on, and I'm doing it with literally just a few submarines out at sea, and that is just a really pitiful little thing. Okay, well this appears, at least at this version, not nearly as interestingly detailed as some of the other types. Cannon, medium, cannon, a little bit maybe. So increase its firepower. Don't know that we need to do armor. I want to try to keep it because I'm guessing speed's going down. Let's keep that up. So not a heavily modified version, but no. I just close that just to make sure I know what I'm changing. Let's go up here, and we have these guys are on full efficiency, but I think there's another one. Thought there was another one here. Yeah. Yeah, let's... Oh, this is actually a larger production line. Let's change this one first. I wanted to see how big of an efficiency hit we take. 110 FA. Okay, see now we've jumped all the way down here. This is why, for at least for the moment, I'm going to keep the BA version here going. It has fewer factories, but it's going to produce almost 3 a day, where this is going to produce, well, almost, well, not even 1 a day, and it has more factories. So once this gets up to a much higher level of efficiency, then we'll see about converting it over. Now, for tanks, we have the Martyr 2 and the Wasp. Now, since some of you like it, I'll break into some of my monologues and talks on history and things. I've definitely been in, you know, I could say I have some very limited military training. Never actually been in the military. It was through Army ROTC in college, and go into all the reasons why I didn't follow through on that way back in the day, but they were valid at the time. So do have some military training, but which is, you know, officer training for the U.S. Army and some of their theory and practice. Did go through some of that, and again, I have not gone through all of it. It was a couple of years worth in college. That's not the equivalent of like my cousin who was in the Army as a lieutenant in the armor. In no way is it equal to his training or many of you who later have been, you know, fighting in the wars. I'm not trying to make that comparison at all. What I'm sort of saying is I do have some of that background, but I also have a lot of influences by what I've read from other nations and other time periods, and how they look at things and view warfare and things. One of them is that there is no, one of the philosophers picked up, there is no useless weapons. All weapons are useful. We can see in World War II, the pike was heavily used. And no, I don't mean the conversion of a rifle by sticking a bayonet on it into a pike, because that's what it is. Like when you're empty, or especially if you're using a bolt-action rifle, and you're charging the enemy, or your enemy's charging you, and you don't have time to, you know, you either, you know, recock the weapon if you're using a bolt-action weapon. Not talking about that pike, which we still use the idea of a pike. Doesn't work so well with a bullpup weapon, but the idea that you have a bayonet because things can get messy close up. I'm talking about real, true, traditional pikes that were still used by the Chinese during the warlord period, definitely during even the Japanese invasion period, there were a lot of units that and I say units, so there were a lot of divisions that some men in the division did not have rifles, and they were infantrymen. These weren't the guys, I don't know, carrying artillery shells to help feed the artillery, so they didn't have rifles. I'm talking about basic infantrymen. They did not have rifles. They probably had very poor training anyways, but they were given, instead of just sort of, some cases I think I've seen some pictures, don't know whether those are entirely training or sort of what they were sent to the front with. They looked sort of like very, very crude, not, no one's fooled, dummy rifle size, that things that have a bayonet on them. I'm talking about full long, whether they were made out of whatever wood or bamboo or something, that have a metal spear tip on them, that were made. Now, I don't think the Chinese were charging Japanese machine gun positions in pike squares or in the Schultron, the long Scottish 2 or 3 layer deep phalanx, if you will, sort of, but thin long thing, pike formations into the enemy. I don't think they were doing that at all. From some of the descriptions are that, within the Chinese warlord or maybe even the some of the Japanese war era, is that Chinese units would sort of move to the front and then just sort of sit down and just sort of sit there in visual sight, long distance visual sight of the enemy. Even units armed with rifles, they would just sort of sit there and look at each other while machine guns and artillery were sort of fighting it out. And that because of the lack of training, because of the lack of motivation, partially because of the lack of ammo, that they may have literally been out of ammo, or they may have said, oh, we've got 5 or 10 rounds per rifle today, and that's not what each man has, and then we go get more. That's like everybody they have. So they're not necessarily wanting to shoot at each other with little or no ammo. They're not motivated to do bayonet charges against the enemy. The enemy isn't motivated to do bayonet charges against you. And so they're trying to keep the machine gun supplied with ammo, often the same rifle ammo, and they're trying to keep the artillery, and so that was sort of the artillery and the machine gun, to a lesser extent, were sort of the kings and deciders on the battlefield. So to sort of keep the guys motivated, instead of sitting there with nothing in their hand, they had a pike that could still sort of kind of theoretically be used. Now, I do understand that at times after the battles, that not that there was never any contact, not that it was often after one side sort of, from some of the descriptions I got, and I don't know how good they all are, and they may be just unique cases and it didn't always go this way, so please, I don't know everything about this, but I know some about it. But that, like, one side's more or less sort of breaking, sort of falling apart, they could tell, then they might have gotten their side a bit more motivated up and marching towards the enemy. Not quite the, bayonet charges of the Napoleonic era that are charging the enemy. The enemy sees all these bayonets coming at them, and then they flee away. Oh, no, it's more like, they're sort of breaking up, so let's sort of go on the offensive now. And they would still take casualties, and the units that were up in front, or even the units that are sort of sitting there, machine guns, and, this is long range for a lot of machine guns, and artillery would kill soldiers. So soldiers would inherit from fallen comrades rifles. So your division that is supposed to be, say, 10,000 men strong is only 5,000 men strong, because there's a lot of various attrition types going on in China, and they may have never recruited a full division in any ways. And for the 5,000 men or something, they may only have 2,000 rifles or something. So that eventually you may get your hands, if you survive long enough, on a rifle, though you may or may not have ever really been trained to use it. So a pike is still useful. Now, if I'm a nation like Germany and I've got lots of pikes, I'm probably not going to be thinking I'm going to ever equip my frontline troops with them. Okay, then that's very valid. Now, here we are, December 1942. We are still producing, or are we still producing? Let's see. This is sort of getting to my point here. Or do we have? I think we may have. We're no longer. Well, we are producing. Okay, no, we're not producing any Panzer IIs, because it is now we have over 3,000 of them, almost 4,000, so we don't need them. And I have been slowly removing or swapping out the battalions that are Panzer IIs with something else, and which tells me that I wanted to see. Oh no, we are still producing. Okay, yes, good. We are still producing some Panzer IIs. Now, we don't need these anymore. Well, like I say, we have over 4,000. I think one of the main reasons I was keeping them is because, and this is where we're going with this, the Martyr II and the Wasp. If you don't know, and I know we've got a lot of people here who are really well informed on this, but like some of my event series, is also a history training and thought. If you can sort of tell that these wheelbase wheel setup is the same as these, so as the Panzer II. The tank obviously is made up of multiple components, and there's significant differences. The Germans were not very efficient in their production. In fact, they were some of the more inefficient in their production, and I can go into it, and I've gone into a previous series into how badly inefficient they were. I know they often are portrayed as being highly efficient. Now, their workmen were highly skilled on the whole, and when they were doing a particular task, they were generally doing it very efficiently, but on their overall productions, they weren't very efficient. But even if they were more efficient, there's still a lot of, shall we say, industrial production changing from a Panzer II to, say, a Panzer IV. Yes, a lot of the machinery can be converted over, but since you already have them in line, production line going, why not use them? And so there was very efficient and useful ways to do this, and one of them is for the Martyr II. It has a PaK 40, which is a 75 millimeter reasonably high velocity gun. I say that because you can look at the L70 75 millimeter gun, which was mounted on the Panther. The normal Panzer IV long-barreled guns were the L42 and the L48. The L48 being a little bit longer of a gun. That L40 and L42 and the L42 and the L48 and the L70, those are all referring to the length of the gun in some sort of measurements. I'm not exactly sure whether that's millimeters or something else. Sorry. Now the PaK 40, I think, is an L42 gun, but I'm not absolutely sure. It may be the L48 barrel length. Somebody wants to correct it, they can post that down below, but it's not of really any importance. So you've got these out-of-date tanks. They're still useful because the 20 millimeter gun will penetrate just the same amount of thickness of armor in, say, 1938 or 39 as it will in 42 or in 45. Now, of course, standard tanks are a lot thicker armor, so they're no longer able to kill tanks. What you are able to do with them in, say, 1944 is kill half-tracks, because half-tracks have very thin armor. 50 calibers will actually go through a lot of their armor. A lot of the scout cars, the Greyhound scout cars, the Stuart light tanks, depends on where and what, but you could potentially knock those out also with a 20 millimeter gun. So they are still useful. They can no longer be relied upon as a independently operating tank knocking out other tanks, but if you have a flood of your tanks that can knock out tanks, and you can supplement it by 10 or 20% more light tanks that can engage other targets, including using their machine guns and their 20 millimeters to say knock out enemy anti-tank guns, knock out enemy crews with bazookas or other things that if they get in close enough to your other tanks, you know, it's supporting firepower. Yes, you're dead if a Sherman hits you, but is a Sherman going to target a 20 millimeter armed Panzer II first, or is it going to target a 75 millimeter gun armed Panzer IV first? They're going to target the damn thing that's going to most likely kill it first, you know. And so if you use them judiciously, if you use them also in the reconnaissance role, which is if you see big bad enemy vehicles, you get the hell out of there and report it. If you see other say infantry or trucks that are driving in a, you know, row down the road, you engage them, and of course if you know you run away. But at some point, for producing new equipment is counterproductive, and that's what the Germans did with these. Is they saw that they could use most of the same production techniques. The Wasp had the engine move into the forward. The Marder 3s, which are based on the 38Ts, T stands for Czechoslovakia in German, is TC, whatever, how they spell it. So, is they move the engine forward, where with the Marder 2s, the engine was left in the rear. And this is some of the inefficiencies, but some of what they did, in my opinion, brilliantly, excuse me, is that they still use the same basic transmission, still use the same engine, still use the same wheel track setup. Most of the whole production elements were the same, and they started to produce very effective, not maybe as good as the Priest or the Saxon, which is the British sort of version with the 25 pounder. The Priest is the 105 millimeter mobile artillery piece based off of the Lee/Grant tank hull model, which that keeps that whole model in production until basically the end of the war, when they stopped making, you know, the Lee/Grants. Most production was in the Grant model. That's the one with the whole mounted 75 millimeter American tank with the small turret 37 millimeter gun. They converted that over to a self-propelled artillery piece. Germans did it on a smaller, lighter vehicle. So yes, the bigger one is a little better. But when you're pressed, you know, put under pressure, America, in my opinion, and I use the term often, pressure, America was not under any real significant pressure for World War II, not like other nations. So they could make choices differently than most other nations and make better choices, if you will. But so they did that really well with the Wasp. That the biggest downside is that it's sort of small, so it couldn't carry a lot of ammo. Often they would have trucks and or half tracks, or the muleteers, which are sort of trucks with tracks, but they're not proper half tracks. Get into more of that some other time. Carrying ammo nearby, so fairly efficiently still. Do that. So they convert that, and the other option is to take basically it is actually taking the Pak 40 anti-tank gun and removing the gun shield, removing the, you know, the wheels and the trail that goes behind it and all that element, but just the gun, you know, the barrel, the breech, and all that mechanism just directly, instead of converting it, because it's different for when it's in a tank. Same basic thing, uses the same ammunition, but instead of, you know, no need to convert it, just take the actual basic elements. They don't produce it and then take it off, but just don't produce the unnecessary components, and then just stick it on either the Marder 2 or the Marder 3. It's just the Pak 40 gun, very effectively. Now this is where someone talked a little earlier about the inefficiencies of German production. What they would do is they would say one out of a particular factory like Alket or one of the others that had a line that was still producing the basic hull form of the Panzer II, and they go, oh, well, for the next 4 months we're going to produce Marder 2s. So you're producing a tank with the engine in the rear, set up drive chain in that setting, produce that, and then we've got that production run. Now we'll convert over to producing the Wasp, which is moving the tank engine forward, changing things up, and so switching back and forth. And sometimes in some of the production, and I've seen this from the photos of it, is that they will in the same factory, on the same factory floor, maybe not quite intermixed, but very close to each other, something like Martyr 2s and Wasp both being worked on at the same time, so that they are swapping back and forth, manufacturing different components somewhat ineffectively, instead of just having, like the US would is they would set up a production line that made a widget, and that production line, they would turn that production line on and it would make that widget at some point almost getting up to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Obviously there's shift changes and other things that quite keep it from being 24/7, and a lot of the US factories I don't think were run on the weekends unless they were a real critical war effort element, and they just added more and more workers. It wasn't the same workers being worked to death, it was more and more shifts and everything. So they would turn that on and build that widget until they didn't need that widget anymore, and that's to the point that they don't ever think they'll need that spare part ever again, and they won't change that widget. They'll just make that widget forever out of that factory, when it could be a combination of widgets which would be a particular tank, until they decide to stop it. They don't tinker with, toy with, switch machines that could make other types of widgets, but they don't switch it, where the Germans would switch back and forth between, they would, we need 500 of these, so they'd set up a machine tool or a group of machine tools, make the 500, and then okay, we need 500 of these other things, and they'd take those same set of machine tools and swap them over to make another doohickey, and they would produce those for 500, where the Americans would just turn it on and keep producing it until they didn't need them ever again, basically, until they decided that they aren't going to make any of that type of thing again, whatever it might be. And that's sort of the efficiency problem that the Germans have. So all weapons are useful. Panzer IIs are still useful. Obviously this is a slightly different case here in that Panzer IIs go into Panzer II battalions. So once we no longer have Panzer II battalions anywhere, we can no longer use them. They're not quite the same as that. But of course I have a bunch of them stuck around. I don't know how well, this is the one thing maybe I should look into, I haven't yet, is how well if I start leasing out Panzer IIs, does that give Japan, because they're no longer the light tanks, this is still Germany's light tank, because it's the way they've sort of modified the system. So if I give Panzer IIs to Japan, are they just going to stockpile them because they have no Panzer II battalions, because they're not a proper substitute for their light tanks? This is why I haven't been leasing a bunch of this stuff, because I really don't think they'll use it well, or use it at all. And of course, so if I have a pool of Panzer IIs, say 4,000 almost that I have, if I convert all of my current divisions away from, I could create another mobile division type, Defend France division type or something like that, that are just, sort of for show units or whatever, and create, and add a Panzer II battalion and use them up. I can do that. I can, as a modder, not as a player, but as a modder, I know that I think I can do a check for stuff in inventory. So if I say, if I have, if I've researched X level of tank, and so I no longer, research X level of tank, so I'm now making Panzer IIs or Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs, and if it's year date, whatever, and do a bunch of other things, and then check, I think I can check to say, how do I have greater than 1,000 of Panzer IIs in my inventory? Then I can have event fired. Once I can have the event fired, I know I can go say, remove 500 Panzer IIs and add 500 Martyr IIs. I know I can do that as a modder, so that I can work on a converting stockpiles through events. I know it can be done through events. I think I can check for current stockpile numbers, and so that I can have also events that if stockpile of Panzer IIs fire event for Wasps, and I can decide, or I can make it dual choice. Do I want to convert these 500 Panzer IIs to Marder IIs or to Wasps, and do a conversion thing? And then I can also make it cost, say for 2 months or something like that, or 3 months, I can remove 2 military factories from a nation and then put them back for, put them back, so you just have the downside of quick converting over that. So I can do it through events, is to convert Panzer IIs to Marder IIs or to Wasps, or I could convert them to submarines if I wanted to. I mean, you convert them to whatever you want, because you just add and remove. But so I can do it through events to show Germany's upgrading. There has been talk about excuse me, a game mechanic that would be more fluid in converting some of these things, and that would be like converting early Panzer IIIs to later long-barreled Panzer IIIs or other similar sorts of things. Now, what I want to see here, and I'm sorry if this has all gotten too long, but wanted to get to here. So we've got this, and I want to see right now, and this is part of playing this thing, because I've not played this far before in Black Ices. So I want to close this just to make sure that I'm doing this one. I want to convert this, and I want to see how red this goes. We could convert to Wasp, but I want to try Marder II production. Okay, that is entirely too bad. That's way too bad of a hit. Because that's basically starting a whole new production line. So I don't know, and I haven't really looked at. So just because I haven't looked at how much of a hit, but it shouldn't be that big of a hit to go from Panzer IIs to Marder IIs or to Wasps. That really shouldn't be a. It should be just like a 10 or 20% hit, quite honestly. Definitely nothing less than a 50% hit. I wanted to see how that worked, because to a degree, now we have these costs for Marder IIs, say, can still be less than building Sturmgeschütz, which would be sort of basing it off of the Panzer III holes. So, reasons to do things, but that's way too bad of a hit for what you should be getting for converting. Way too much. Now, maybe something, and I really quite honestly haven't looked at it in detail, for modding, because modding is sort of a a fairly big genre of what to do, and I haven't looked at all everywhere. Okay, so we should see about, let's convert. See, I'm just never really comfortable that I'm doing that, because these are still the 3 FAs. We're gonna go over to the 3 LAs. Sure, my grade. That I also think is a bit too big of a hit as well, because that's only, that's about a 50% hit. And what I think the F was, and again my memory's a bit fuzzy, the F was the short-barreled 50mm gun, and the L was the long-barreled 50mm gun, I think. And yeah, I think they increased the thickness of the armor and such, but that isn't that big of a mechanical change. Most of the tanks just got slower as time went on. Okay, well, that's about it for this episode. It could go on longer. Definitely did want to show some of my sort of behind the scenes, what I sort of have to go through. Not have to, but go through not on camera because they don't flow very far, because obviously we haven't gotten very far in the series. But I hope it's been informative and interesting for you to watch. And for me, things that are informative and interesting are fun for me to watch. Hope it is with you. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron. And of course, please post comments, feedback. Thanks for watching. See you next time.